The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Thursday, April 27th. I'm Donna Will, Professional Development Coordinator for the Central Maryland Regional Office of the Maryland Department of Health's Developmental Disabilities Administration. We welcome you to the American Rescue Plan Act, which is called ARPA, 5.5% Reconciliation Webinar. On the panel today, we have Deputy Secretary Bernie Simons. We have Robert White, Director of Operations. We have Elizabeth Peters, Deputy Director, Administrative Services. We have Sung Kim, Data Analyst. We have Nicholas Gabor, Director of Finance. And and Paulina Nwosu. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few things about the webinar. All participants are in listen-only mode. There are two options to hear the webinar, by computer and phone. And if you look at the panel interface on your right labeled audio, you can click either computer or phone to switch for the best option. We will be recording the webinar. Today's PowerPoint has also been uploaded as an attachment and is available for you to download from the handout section in the webinar panel. Questions can be typed in the question or chat box in the webinar panel, and we will get to those towards the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce Robert White. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Donna, and thank you. And thank all of you for taking time out of your busy days to join us today. As Donna mentioned, my name is Robert White, and I am the Operations Director for the DDA. The Maryland Department of Health Developmental Disabilities Administration is holding this webinar to explain the reconciliation process for the 5.5% retroactive rate increase using ARPA funds. The plan is to spend about 20 or 30 minutes on presentation to ensure that we leave plenty of time for questions. So please type your questions in the questions section of the pane, and we will get to as many as we can during the Q&A session, and we will also create an FAQ document that we'll send out as well, in addition to sharing the link to the webinar. I would now like to turn things over to Nick Gabor, Director of Finance for DDA, who will start us off by taking us back to 21 when the 5.5% payments were made, and then he'll turn it over to Sung Kim, who will walk you through the invoice details in PCIS 2. So with that said, Nick, I'm going to turn control over to you.
Great, thank you, Robert. So first of all, what I'll do is kind of give us a bit of a refresher. You can advance the slide, and we're going to talk about this 5.5% ARPA advance that was given. I know this has been a couple of years now. So for those who may not remember, or for those who may need a refresher, on October 1st of 2021, estimated payments were advanced to providers as an immediate pay, and this was to cover that 5.5% increase in claims from April 1st of 2021 to September 30th of 2021. So this is the ARPA payment that we're talking about in question, the payment that went out to the providers. It was included in that quarterly payment and in October, and it was an immediate pay. So if we go to this next slide here, now what we're talking about is, okay, how did we calculate what was earned against that ARPA payment? Because the ARPA payment was an estimate. So what we did is you take that 5.5% that has been applied to paid claims for the actual claims for the period of April 1st to June 30th of 2021. This amount right here that I just referenced is what's going to be reconciled against what was advanced to providers on October 1st. So we'll be taking those two against each other, and I'll talk about the formula in a moment just to further clarify. I do want to also highlight that earned payments for any payments in July 1st, 2021 going forward were already been paid as rates that had an increase of 5.5%. That was effective July 1st, 2021. So that is also something that is important to note. Now for the For anyone who may not remember or may was wondering where those payments were, for PCIS2 FPS services, the fee payment system services, those earned increases were paid out as a part of the quarterly payment. For the non-FPS services, they were included in whatever the traditional payment system was for that service. So if we go to this next slide now, I'll talk about just briefly and to also help you visualize what that advance minus reconciliation formula looks like so that you can visualize it here. We took the 5.5 ARPA advance, and again, that is that estimate that I highlighted on the slide, 2 slides earlier, that was paid on October, and we subtracted against it what was actually earned on that 5.5% in that period I mentioned earlier. And that is what we got as the clawback or payment amount. It could have been a positive or minus depending on what resulted. So for providers that maintain services still in PCIS2, the reconciled amount, whether it is a positive or a negative, is going to be included as a part of the DDA fiscal year 24 Q1 payment invoice. And that's going to show up as an adjustment. And in a moment, I'll pass it on to Sung, who will explain that a little more. Now, for providers that no longer maintain services in PCIS2, it's just going to be important to note that the reconciled amount, whether it is a positive or a negative, will either be paid to you or collected by just issuing you a check or providing you an invoice to the provider, whether by email or by snail mail. So that's kind of what what to expect going forward. This is how it was calculated. This is where the numbers come from, both the advance and the reconciliation amount. And this is kind of the steps that we've taken now. And so now I'm going to pass it on to Sung, who's going to walk you through kind of the PCIS2 invoice part of things, kind of show you what those invoices look like, where you might see the adjustment show up on the invoice when it's posted to PCIS2 and so on. So I'll pass it on to Sung.
Hello, could you move to the next slide? Yes. Okay, so this is the screenshot of the previously paid ARPA 5.5%. So you can look it up, look up this entry in PCIS2 by going to October 2021, or you can look up the FY 22 and Q2, I think. And then, so next slide. So if you click on that pencil button, it will take you to this screen, which shows the detail and along with the ticket number that's associated with this. And next slide. And this is the invoice that went out with the previous invoice screen. And next one. And this will be the invoice for the FY24 Q1. The yellow highlighted one, that's the adjustment for the upper 5.5% reconciliation. So it'll be added as an adjustment in the Q1 invoice. Next screen. And then if you click on that the underline, then it will take you to this screen, which shows the details for the adjustments. And next screen, please. Wait, this doesn't show the one I attached. Okay, so so there's a missing slide. So I'll be sending out an invoice with the summary of the reconciliation amount, with the details for the FPS and the details for the non-FPS portion. So I believe the invoice detail was sent out on March 11th, but I will send that out again in the at a later date. And back to you, Nick.
Great, thank you, Sung. So yeah, like Sung said, he will resend that invoice, that reconciliation detail sheet to you all. So now what I want to bring up, and again, these slides will be distributed, so don't worry about trying to scribble down some of this information quickly if you feel pressured to. But for providers who are not in PCIS2 anymore and have transitioned to LTSS, if you receive an invoice, I'm just going to briefly touch upon the ways that you can remit payment. Checks can be mailed via FedEx to the typical DDA address, 201 West Preston Street on the 4th floor. Please put in the check the attention to the DDA fiscal director. All provider refunds, whether it's by check or by wire, should have the DDA 5.5% ARPA reconciliation refund as the description It's just going to really help us in terms of tracking and monitoring, who sent payments and who hasn't, so that if we need to reach out, we don't want to bother anyone unnecessarily. And so any of these refunds should have a copy of the email or the check sent to both myself and copy my deputy, Paul Enison, as well, so that we can help track and monitor those payments and make sure that there's no issues with the payments being sent. If we go to the next slide, you'll see the ACH instructions. That'll have all of the information you'll need from account number, routing number, whatever you need. It's just the typical information for our account. And then the wire instructions will be on the following slide as well, where you should have any information you may need if that is your desired method of payment after you receive your invoice. I would wait until you receive your invoice, obviously, and you make sure you are up to speed in terms of what the instructions are. So the next slide will be some of the key dates that I just want to highlight. So we've already kind of talked about these, but just to kind of reiterate them, fiscal year 24 Q1 invoices for providers who are maintaining FPS services in PCIS2 is going to be available in the normal payment cycle on July 1st, 2023. So that payment is going to go out the same method, the same way, same date. It's just within that payment, there is going to be an adjustment or an invoice in there that will be added onto that quarterly payment. Now, the actual invoice will be viewable within PCIS2 about a week or two prior to the date as the payment files are approved. So you can check in PCIS2 in the week or two preceding the quarterly payment to see the invoice in there. Now, requests for refund for providers who have fully transitioned to LTSS will be sent about the same time. So that that invoice or that check will be sent around that July 1st date. And so the plan and the goal there is that within 30 days of the reconciliation, that payment will arrive. And then on that invoice will be a date, and you'll have within 30 days of the invoice date to send your payment via your preferred method. Like I said, payments are due within 30 days of the billing date. So that's kind of the just payment information, when these payments are going out, when we're expecting payments back, if there is owed money to you, when you should expect to receive those payments or those checks. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass it off to Elizabeth, who will be able to talk about the office hours and opportunities you may have if you have any additional questions or if you wish to meet with some of the DDA staff who are here today. So I'll pass it on to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Nick. So I know that this is a lot of information and some of you may have additional concerns or need additional follow-up. So we will be holding office hours next week on May 2nd, 4th, and 5th on the hours that you see on the screen here. So slots are available on a first come, first served basis. Next slide, please. If interested in signing up for office hours, you may sign up through the Calendly link on the screen or the QR code that you also see on the screen there. And now I will turn it over to Robert White for our question and answer session. So next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Before we get into the Q&A session, I'm going to take over the screen sharing to display the slide that Sung wanted to speak to earlier, just so that you have the context behind it. So let me see here. This is me trying to make sure I pull up the right window. Doesn't seem to work in split screen mode, but let me. Sung, do you have that slide available? Might be better if I make you the presenter.
I have it. How do I share my screen? Oh, share my web.
Yeah, I'm going to make you the presenter, and then I believe you just select what you want to share.
Actually, that's a webcam. Let me see.
Okay. We see it now.
You see it?
Yep.
Okay, hold on. Show screen. Okay. So can you see my upper 5.5% reconciliation detail?
Yes.
Okay. So so I already sent this out on March 11th. So it has 3 tabs, and the first one is the summary of the amount, which shows the PCS to FPS total amount and the non-FPS claim amount, and then previous ARPA dollar minus the newly calculated, and then it will show the what the reconciliation amount will be. And then the second tab will show the details behind the PCS to FPS total amount, and the third tab will show the details for the non-FPS portion. Yep, that's it. Back to you, Robert. Do I stop this? Let me see.
Thank you, Sung. So now we will get into some questions. Okay, this first question is for you, Nick. The estimate was using April through September, but the actual claims used were April through June. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. That's where the advance and the earned were versus earned were. If you know, we want to kind of explain it a little bit more, I can pass it off to Peter, but that is accurate, yes.
Great, thank you. Next question for you, Sung. What report in PCIS 2 can we run to reconcile for ourselves the amount if they wanted to go in and run their own report?
I don't think a report is available in PCIS 2. It will just show you the number of days attended, but it doesn't show the rate. So you'll have to ask me. I mean, you'll have to request a report of the all attendances and the rates used for each day.
Great, thank you. Question regarding whether we'll be sending out the reconciliation details spreadsheet. The answer to that question is yes. Peter, I don't know if you wanted to elaborate on that.
The answer is yes. Sung referenced that it was already sent out on March 11th, but we can provide again and can view that when we have the meetings if requested.
Okay, great. And somewhat related, what details will be provided from DDA in support of the calculation of either invoices or payment amounts due? Peter or Sung?
So the detail behind any amount that is going to be reconciled, positive or negative, is the difference between the advance and the file that we send you of all the claims that occurred, the 5.5% on top of that. That is the amount that is to be reconciled and will be treated as an adjustment on the first quarter payment. So if you're familiar with the first quarter payments in PCIS 2, there's a part that you saw when Sung was presenting at the bottom that's for adjustments. That's where it will be indicated, and it will just be part of the normal formula that drives the total invoice amount.
Great, thank you for that. So question, more of a statement than a question. There was a recoupment that was done recently, and ARPA 5.5% reconciliation was included in this recoupment. How come there is another round of reconciliation? What I can say is that we initially, once we completed the reconciliation for the 5.5% ARPA, we did, send out the invoices related to that. However, we never did take it a step further and take it from the Q4 payment. So the payments you received in April did not include any either debit or credit related to the ARPA 5.5% reconciliation. Okay. Question, please remind me when the reconciliations will be sent and how. Will it be by email? Nick.
So in terms of the reconciliation results that Sung referenced, those will be sent via email. In regards to the actual invoices or the payment information, that will depend on what service where the provider is located. If you're still in PCIS2, you'll be able to see that invoice in PCIS2 about a week or two prior to the quarterly payment. If you are in LTSS, that information, that invoice will either be emailed or mailed to you as well around that same July 1st date.
Thank you, Nick. Next question is, what is the process if the amount due is disputed? What we'll do is we're going to follow the exact same process that we used for the personal supports reconciliations. I thought that process worked out well, and basically providers who had questions, part of it will be resolved with the office hours next week if you sign up for a slot there. Sung and team will be there ready to walk you through the calculations. But yeah, we're going to follow that same process. Otherwise, you can send an email to Nick and his team and also request a session if you have a dispute about the amount due, and we'll work with you to help clear that up. Also, just going back to the last question, we will be sending these invoices out via email. So it's important to make sure that the email addresses that are listed in PCIS2 are updated. I would also say that if you don't receive this information, the details by Wednesday of next week, to please reach out to us. Another question for you, Nick. What dates was the estimate based on?
So the estimate was based on April 1st of 2021 to September 30th of 2021.
Thank you. I also want to say, because we got a question early on, so this is not applicable to CCS agencies. CCS agencies are not paid through PCIS2. This only applies to services that are paid through PCIS2. So if you're part of a CCS agency, this would not apply to you. Next question. So the 5.5% was really effective 4/1, not 7/1, correct? Yes, that is correct. If you recall, we did a retroactive rate increase, and it was retroactive back to April 1 of 2021. If you've not received a reconciliation, we're going to resend those out. So again, if you do not receive it by Tuesday or Wednesday of next week, please let us know. Who in the agency will receive the reconciliation email? I'm going to let Sung answer that, but it's whoever is listed in the system as that point of contact. But Sung, if you want to.
I thought it was Nicholas. I mean, Nick.
I think they mean the emails that were, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, when Sung is going to send out those reconciliation details, the emails that he's using are pulled directly.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so it came from psize.dda@maryland.gov.
Yes, so please check PCIS too. So whoever's email address is listed there is going to be the individual that will receive the details.
Yeah, and then email was sent out to the email address listed in the PSIS2 provider screen.
Great, thank you. Next question. Our agency recently entered LTSS for all billing, but are still anticipating receiving a Q1 payment. Should we wait for the reconciliation to be done from those funds, or should we just pay the funds back using the invoice process? Nick.
Without knowing the specific situation, what I would suggest is you likely want to still pay. I would suggest you still pay via the invoice. If we send you an invoice, I'd have to double check. I'd really have to double check without knowing the specific situation that we're referencing here. Those funds may be used. But long story short, if we send you an invoice, if you've transitioned to LTSS and if we end up sending you an invoice, then we're expecting you to pay via the invoice method unless we otherwise dictate to you. I think that's probably going to be the best. But if I'll check internally with my team, and if we deem anything else, then I'll send the communication out to the LTSS providers.
Thank you, Nick. Next question. How can we get the email updated in PCIS2? Peter?
So you should reach out to your provider services person at the regional office. They will make those changes for you.
Okay, next question. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I was just gonna, I think you were asking some question earlier about, who's receiving those emails with the provider, and it's usually the director's email, and then they have listed another contact. So it's going out to 2 people for each agency.
Great, thank you. How can we meet next week if we do not have the emailed reconciliation? So if you're referring to the details, the goal is to have those, at the conclusion of this webinar, to start sending those details out. If you do not receive those details by Tuesday or Wednesday, and we get them to you, haven't had enough time, then we're very flexible. We can schedule some time outside of the office hours. We want to make sure that you all are fully understand how the reconciliation amounts were derived, and so yeah, we'll be very flexible and providing that service to ensure that you're comfortable with the amounts. Does this explain why most providers have an overpayment, because 6 months was used for the estimate and earned was only for 3 months? or could more explanation be given? Peter, I'm going to ask you to take that one.
Yeah, that explains it to the T. Advances were given, or the one-time only payment was for a 6-month period, and we paid that in October. But the FPS system doesn't pay earned until the Q3 payment, which would have been January 1. So when you got those payments, you got the earned amount that included the increased 5.5%. For those services July 1st forward. So that's why the reconciliation needs to be just the period April 1 through June 30th, because that's what has not been, paid as earned yet. And that's what this process will do. Essentially, we're taking back the estimated advance and giving you exactly what you earned. But that does account for why most of it is an overpayment.
Thank you, Peter. How will non-FPS or BSS invoice adjustments be handled if providers have already been paid that did not include the ARPA fund prior to the announcement about ARPA funds? I may need a little bit more information on the second part of that question, but for the first part, the non-FPS, that's handled obviously outside of the system, and Casey Cox, our federal billing administrator, will be part of that process. So as soon as we complete this reconciliation of FPS services in July, then we'll pivot and start working on the non-FPS services or the qualifying claims that occur outside of the PCIS2 ecosystem. Email address to request the file. So in the slide deck, you will have the email address for Nick Gabor, as well as his deputy, Paulinus Nuosu. So you can send an email address to either one of them, and we'll be sure that you get the file. Okay. Are there any other questions? We still have time. Okay. Okay, this question is related to the 10% one-time only payment that was made back in October. And however, most providers did not receive the full 10%. When will those payments be reconciled? Those payments, we've already started the reconciliation process on those payments. That's more of a manual process, so we're going to work through those as quickly as we can to get those done as soon as possible. Will all of the clawback be lumped under residential, or will it be broken out by program? We don't have Paulinus with us today, but what they typically go ahead.
Peter,
Nick.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for the clawbacks for services that are in PCIS2, we will try to claw back from each service what pertains to that particular service. The only time we go to residential is if that service is not in PCIS2, and then we want to get it from somewhere, we go to residential services. So my response is that we will claw back from each of the services unless there's no payment from that particular service. And in that case, we go to residential services if they are still in PCIS 2. Otherwise, then we go to we will send the person an invoice.
Great, thank you, Paulinus. Have the calculations changed since the email of March 11th with the detail? Sung?
No, I haven't changed the calculations, but I expect that there might be some error updates have been entered between March 11 and now. So in that case, if I do see error updates occurred for your agency, then I will send a revised file.
Thank you. Any other questions? I did get a blank question, meaning I got the notification of a question, but there's no text in it. So you may, the person who sent that may want to resend the question. Okay. Yeah, there are some comments related to residential services and the application of the 5.5%. And so this was also brought to our attention by Max, and so we'll be taking a look at it. But the question relates to applying the 5.5% to residential services after the reduction of the base for room and board and or cost of care. So we're going to have a conversation internally to take a look at that and you know, make the necessary adjustments. And also we have some, sometimes we'll get comments that are more specific or agency specific. So if we don't address those in a public forum, we will be reaching out to you to address it directly. Okay, I have some individuals not included on the reconciliation that had days attended during April through June of 2021. What should I do about that, Sung or Peter?
So you're saying that the file you received did not include some attendance for a period of time. So if you've already submitted error updates to correct that, then it would be included in what Sung is talking about reconciling when he mentioned error updates. If you have not done error updates yet, then I would suggest that you submit those so that they can be included in any reconciliation that we do.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, We're at the end of the questions, but we still want to wait a few minutes just to make sure there's no last minute questions before we conclude. Someone seeking clarity, may I just clarify that the estimated payment advance basically paid for July through September twice? Peter, would you like to take that one?
You could interpret it that way. One was, an advance was given when we didn't know what, earned had not been paid yet. We wanted to get these funds out and in your hands. So we gave out a full 6-month advance. But as been stated earlier in the presentation, beginning July 1, those rates were actually increased in the system, and those claims that were earned were paid as part of the normal invoicing process. So essentially, you received 6-month advance, got paid half of it July 1st forward through the normal invoicing system. And really what we're doing now is reconciling April 1 through June 30th, paying you what you earned there, the 5.5%, and then just taking back the total estimated advance.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to again thank everyone for taking time to have this conversation with us today. We did receive a lot of great questions. We'll be putting together an FAQ doc. Again, if there were comments that were more specific to your organization, we'll reach out to you directly to address those unique situations. Just another reminder about the office hours next week. We're excited about that and having the opportunity to sit down with some of you to talk this through. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Donna, to close things out.
Thank you again for attending today's webinar and for posting your questions. As always, we value your feedback, and we will review and respond to frequently asked questions by our regular updating of the DDA's FAQ document. Please stay healthy, and thank you again for your dedication to our DD community. We're going to end the webinar.